Hi, welcome to our program, Strengthening Local 4-H Groups. I'm Don Wishart, Communications Specialist with Extension Communications Service at Iowa State University. We know that most of you taking part in tonight's program are Iowa 4-H volunteers, 4-H committee members, and Extension 4-H professionals. You're part of a team, and your county training effort can have great impact on your local 4-H groups. We also know that audiences in at least 5 other states have joined us for this opportunity to consider what is and what can be the strength and direction of 4-H in the years ahead. Now, you know that it's impossible to do all of that in an hour. We know that too, but we can all begin to generate some ideas. Now, we'll do that from our end with some guests here in the studio and with video segments that examine 4 program components: youth involvement in program planning, the experiential or hands-on learning approach, making 4-H fun, and building self-esteem. And these components have the potential to strengthen local 4-H groups. The other critical part of this total effort is your questions. Now, we'll have 4-H specialists, a human development expert, and a 4-H volunteer on hand to respond to as many questions as time will allow. And with that in mind, here's the phone number to call. It's 1-800-255-2255, extension 1409. And you'll have to ask for that extension number, 1409. Knowing that we'll run out of time before we run out of questions, the State 4-H staff will be available to receive calls after the show from about 8:45 to 9:30. Now, that phone number is 515-294-1017. And all questions that you call in tonight will be answered by phone or by letter. Well, that's enough from me. Let's meet our first guest, Jerry Parsons, who is State 4-H leader. Jerry, we're not here just to watch television for an hour. What's the rationale or the reason behind this program and this total effort?
Don, the main reason that we're here tonight is because we've taken a look over about the 4-H enrollment in the last several years and discovered there's a very serious decline in the number of young people involved in 4-H and particularly involved in our community clubs. We'd like to look at some of those statistics to see what that means for us so that we can have a better picture of what's happening to 4-H enrollment in Iowa. The first graph or chart that we want to look at deals with community club enrollment. As you look at that chart, the chart will explain to you and show you that we have gone from about 46,000 4-Hers in 1980 to about 25,000 or about 35,000 in 1986. And if we follow that same projection of decline in community club enrollment, we would expect by 1990 we would have just 25,000 young people. Now, this set of decline is a serious matter as far as we're concerned. We believe that we need to take a look at ways in which we can stop that decline and make some changes. Now, one of the things that I hear from many of my friends and many of the people who look at this and say, oh, the decline in number of young people is also happening at the same time, and doesn't that parallel? Let's look at another chart and see what's happening. Take a look at, yes, the decline in young people has occurred. From about 430,000 young people, these are young people grades 4 to 12 in Iowa, to about 350,000 in 1986. But look, that projected number of young people will increase in about 2 years. A number of people will say, oh, the easy route out is wait for the number of kids to increase and enrollment will increase. Look what happens when we put those two charts together. And I think we'll see something else that's happening with that. Look at the gap and indicate that the line of decline in 4-Hers is faster than what the decline in number of young people. And if it happens that it has in the past, that the decline continues, when the numbers go up, we're not sure that the numbers of 4-Hers will go up. A lot of people say we've got a problem, and we want to do something about that.
Well, Jerry, the impression I get from looking at this last graph is that the decline is significant. Now, why do you think that's happening?
As we listen to young people, we listen to parents, volunteers, and professional staff members, we find a number of things happening. First of all, one of the things that they're telling us is that young people are not as involved in planning their local club programs or their group programs or the events that they're carrying out as much as they ought to be. Young people tell us the adults help us too much. We ought to have more involvement. And I'd ask you to listen and watch carefully to some of the videos tonight, because I think you'll hear a story that is important and significant. Secondly, we're concerned about the fact that we hear young people say meetings aren't fun or 4-H events aren't fun. Thirdly, they tell us that it's dull, boring, and when we listen to and really ask them what they're talking about, we find out that they really aren't doing a lot of hands-on experience. It's listening to somebody tell them to do something rather than getting in and doing it themselves. And then lastly, we talk about recognition and building self-esteem, the importance of young people being recognized. And there's a neat young man's story that we'll see tonight, which says that ribbons and certificates and prize money is not the only type of recognition. We believe all of these factors are reasons why we have developed the 4 units that you just talked about. It's an exciting array of units, and we think those will help us make a difference and will make a change in that decline in 4-H involvement.
Okay. You mentioned the video segments, and we're about ready to look at the first one. This one involves a 4-H leader and 3 4-Hers who talk about youth development in program planning. And after we look at the first one, we'll have a chance to talk with one of the volunteers. So we'll look at that now.
Okay.
One of the most important functions of your 4-H group is to help your 4-Hers prepare to be responsible adults. That means standing back while your 4-Hers make their own plans and their own mistakes. That's even more important to 4-Hers than earning ribbons and trophies.
Well, we had a very good 4-H club, we thought, in that our statistics, we had some of the we had an awful lot of exhibits at the fair. We had 30 4-Hers in our 4-H club. We did a lot of activities. We had, we were just a standard, we thought, well-organized organization, and we were in the paper a lot, and so we just thought we were doing a very, very good job.
There was nothing to let Marlene know that this was not the case. Then one of her 4-Hers was brave enough to write her a letter.
I'm not sure what prompted this, whether there was some reason that she was unhappy with me or what, but all of a sudden she had said, I thought 4-H was for this 4-Hers. She says, it seems to me that you're doing an awful lot of the planning and an awful lot of the organizing, and you're not giving us a chance to have a say on the things we are doing in 4-H.
At first, Marlene was hurt. After all, she'd been doing her best for her 4-Hers, but perhaps she'd been doing so much that there was no room for them to do their best. After a while, things began to change with the help of the 4-Her who wrote the letter.
I think that was the biggest change that came about through all of this, was the feeling of being aware of these young people, and that they were young people, and that I had to handle their feelings rather than just, how they were doing in their projects and this type of thing, whether they were going to get a blue ribbon or a red ribbon. Another thing, I think we changed a little bit on our expectations, what we were expecting from the 4-Hers. We tried not to have our expectations quite as, well, I should say, we set our own goals for the girls. And then eventually we allowed the girls to set their own goals, and maybe we thought they should be higher, but eventually we understood where they were and tried to work that at that point, and we had to change our own thinking.
Young people are increasingly asking for and being given a share in the planning process at all levels. It's not always easy, but it's always worthwhile. Julie Almquist, a 4-H professional, jokes that her 4-Hers say that her meetings are the longest they'll ever sit through. Julie finds that her 4-Hers are able to take some of the workload from her shoulders and learn essential skills in the process. The members see the benefits, too.
First of all, we get a lot of communication skills when we do this. We can get a bunch of ideas together, and we can relate with each other, and we can learn, we can get each other's ideas and bring them together and get the needs that the 4-Hers have, and from more than one side. And we also we get our goals set, and we can get a lot accomplished when we're organized into these different activities.
Things that you think are important.
It works just as well in local groups. This 4-H group sees the value in developing projects of their own, in this case, a booth for the county fair.
It's our booth, and we're going to display our projects in it, so it's nice to be proud of our booth that we made it up too, that the whole club could be a part of it, and not just the leaders, and we're help making it, and so it's more fair, and we just feel better about it.
4-Hers are ready to take on the responsibility of decision-making and planning. After all, that's what makes 4-H theirs.
It's very important to have all youth participate in the decision-making process of their local 4-H group. A lot of times if the leader stands there and tells the 4-H club what they're going to be doing and how it's going to be done, the 4-H members don't feel a part of the group or don't feel it's their own group. But if the leader steps back and says, okay, this is your group, you can decide what we're going to, what you want to do, how you want to do it, and I'm here just to help you, or I'll guide you along the path, okay? And if the club members are given that opportunity, they feel a sense of belonging type of thing, and they also feel proud of that group, and when things get a little rough, or a lot of the kids, get a little disheartened with the program or whatever, the other members are there and saying, hey, this is our group, remember, we're a team, we're a club.
Welcome back. I'd like to have you meet the 4-H volunteer who was featured in that last video. And this is Marlene Bartlett. She's from Cerro Gordo County and was a volunteer there in 4-H for about 12 years. Marlene, that was quite an experience for you to have received that letter from a 4-Her in a club that you thought was doing everything right.
Certainly.
Do you think it was hard for her to write that letter?
I think it was. I think she wanted to write it or wanted to talk about it for quite a while, but this was the only way that she really thought she could express herself, was through the letter. And it was certainly a good thing in the long run.
How did it turn out for her? Was it a positive experience in the end after the initial frustration?
Oh yes, we made sure that she was a part of our planning, along with several other of the girls, and she stayed in our 4-H club longer, right up to the age limit. Most of our 4-Hers, when they were seniors in high school, went on to college, she was employed in Cerro Gordo County, and she stayed with us then until she was at the age limit. So I thought we worked well together after I got over the initial shock.
Okay. We have a question in regard to cliques in 4-H clubs, and I will address this to really either one of you that wants to give it a try. The question is, we've noticed that in some 4-H groups, certain young people always want to be together. Are there some ways to break up cliques or keep those from forming? Marlene, have you had any experience in your club in the past that would shed some light on that?
Well, the cliques are a very common type of thing, or I think there have been some within our club, and I found that occasionally if you would have small groups, work like two people work together and then you bring another person in, and you can do some activities that will break up these cliques, and then eventually they'll go back. But some of the activities that you can do within the club structure can put different people together, and I find that to be helpful.
Okay. Don, it also seems to me that when we're planning events and if it is a problem, talking with the young people about that, about whether they need to get involved with some other young people, or helping them see that always sitting beside or always being with the same person limits their experiences. And I think that planning, and if you've got that open kind of planning that Marlene developed with her group after the letter came, it seems to me that helps a great deal as we work with it. And part of that's letting the young people plan their activities and think through what's best for them as they look at whether it's an event or the total year's 4-H program.
Okay. Let's turn to a little bit different topic here. 4-H is competing with school activities for available time. What are some things that we can do as leaders to help 4-H groups compete with other youth activities and other youth organizations? This sounds like this came from a leader.
Let me talk about something that a volunteer says on one of the tapes that we're going to be using in this program. King Kelly talks about in one of the tapes that you videoed with him that it's important to look at what's going on in your community and what are schools doing, what are churches doing, and then not to do the same thing in the 4-H program, to do something unique and special in 4-H that we're not duplicating in some other one. And I think King's got a pretty good idea in the way of kind of shaping 4-H so that it's unique to that community and to that group of young people.
Talking about groups of young people, another question in that same general vein. We have several large 4-H groups with wide age spreads in our county. Are there some ways to develop a program to fit all of those different interests? Now, I think you probably had quite an age spread in your 4-H club. Was that a difficult thing to do, to cover all of those interests?
Somewhat, although when we started having the 4-Hers plan with us, we made it an important stress that the young people, the young 4-Hers, needed to be involved, and there were things that were needed to be for them also. And so that the older ones helped us to plan for making the younger ones become involved also. And I thought that was a big way of closing that gap by actually having them help prepare the programs.
Okay. I think we can begin to think about turning to our next video segment. This one examines two more of the program components that we talked about earlier. Fun in 4-H, making 4-H enjoyable, and the idea of hands-on learning. And I think in this next one we'll get to see some of King Kelly, the 4-H leader that you just mentioned. In the first part of our program, we'll be hearing from 3 4-H professionals, and the second half will be a 4-H leader, a 4-H parent, and several 4-Hers. So we'll take a look at that second video segment now.
I try to accomplish reaching young people who normally wouldn't join in groups with something that will attract them, and offer some of the regular 4-H programs that we have going, such as food and nutrition or food and fitness, leadership skills, citizenship skills, and grooming. I call it like a gift pack wrapping. It's just the outside of a nice gift inside. And once they start doing the double Dutch, that's the gift wrapping. Then they find all these other gifts inside, such as the things that 4-H has to offer.
Having fun in 4-H is what keeps kids coming back for more. 4-H professionals like Sheila Manley and Jim Pease know that the gift wrapping of fun is more than just the sugar coating on the pill. It's an important component of the learning process itself.
I think having fun is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, I guess people people learn in lots of ways. They learn. Some few people learn because they love to soak up knowledge. You know, other people learn because they have just a yen for subject matter about a certain kind of subject matter. But most people don't learn that way, and fun is just a good way to help it be enjoyable for people. I find through both my teaching in the classroom and in teaching with adults and youth that kids learn, or people learn best when they're enjoying it.
4-H staff member Katie White has similar experiences.
I found that working with young people, when they have fun and get involved with activities, they have a tendency to learn things and be able to retain that longer. Just from my experiences in Jamaica, I would teach kids certain songs and I'd go back and see them a couple months later and they still remembered the song because it was something they were involved in and they had fun with, and it was action, and so having fun is real important in getting the young people involved.
When learning is fun, everybody benefits from the experience.
Two things come to mind when learning has been successful and learning has been enjoyable for the youth and the adult. Number one, it gives a real positive self-image, a positive self-respect to both the youth, both the learner and the teacher, both the youth and the adult. They both develop a very positive self-image. The adult or the teacher, because they have been able to facilitate that learning. The youth, because they have been, because they've learned, and they're both excited about that. They've gained something personally about it. The other thing that happens, though, of course, is that I think is extremely important. And I talk about this with the staff and the camping program and other people I work with, and that's that youth today, perhaps more than ever, need positive adult role models. And if they see that an adult can have fun with them and they can still learn from that person, that's a very positive model for them to come away with.
Having fun is important for kids, and so is being part of what's going on, learning from hands-on experience. Young people learn better when they participate. King Kelly is a 4-H leader who emphasizes learning by doing. He also teaches workshops for other 4-H leaders to help them understand the hands-on approach.
Well, I'd kind of like to rephrase that a little bit, and when I give my workshops, I make learning fun. And I think we find out if kids are having fun and doing something, they'll learn much faster. I try to do this in my 4-H meetings. I have different things the kids to do. Like tonight, we'll have a meeting, and I'll have a paper when they come in. And tonight, they have the states on, and they got to find the nicknames. I have the answers at the bottom, so the 9, 10, 11-year-olds who probably don't know them can either try to hunt down below and find them, and maybe two of them will get together. And the older members, they'll just sit down and try to see how many they can get. So this is a kind of type of things that I do in my meeting to make it fun for the kids, yet they're learning something. Really, it's a challenge for me as a leader to think of something new each time. I have to admit, though, after 4 or 5 years, I kind of use them over again. But again, we have the kids seem to enjoy it, and that's how you learn, repeating.
4-H parents appreciate the hands-on learning approach, too.
I think they learn always best by doing. I believe that, just in my experience with my own kids, that they remember, if they make the mistakes themselves, then they remember better than if you do it for them and they just watch. Once they've made the mistake or had the success, they remember in their own minds what it was they did right or what they did wrong in order to not do it again the next time.
The best testimonials come from the 4-H'ers themselves.
You can learn from like your peers instead of having people older adults lecture you, because you get lectured all the time in school, and it's kind of a break to learn from peers and other outside people other than your teachers.
I like actually doing the work instead of sitting around and sitting around in a circle and talking about what we can do. It's a lot more fun this way because we get to actually experience the group project working together.
It gets you involved with older and younger members, and you just get to know the other members a lot better, and it's better communication between the older and younger, so the younger kids aren't scared of the older.
Because if you don't, then you get bored and you quit. Most of my peers have quit before this, but they aren't in my group now, so they didn't start out. They have a boring group. I quit their group too. We started our own.
Welcome back. The first person I'd like to introduce on this panel of guests is Jim Pease.
Bullwinkle the moose.
Jim is a, believe it or not, 4-H youth development specialist here at Iowa State University and a member of the state 4-H staff. Is there anything you want to say to defend yourself at this point?
No, Don. I wore this hat for two reasons. Number one, this is a segment on fun learning, and so I wanted to interject a little fun into it. But I think more importantly is for leaders to realize it's a technique called wear a funny hat. That's what it is, and it works real well with kids. I wanted to wear it as a message to leaders to not be afraid to kind of let their hair down a little bit and let that kid in them come out a little bit. Wearing a funny hat is one way to do that. A segment in fun in 4-H doesn't have to be a hat like this. In fact, I think Rick Hoffmaster has a whole bunch of them that he wears, and he's going to try and steal this one from me, I think. But it doesn't necessarily. You can use it in sort of a figurative way too. That leaders can have fun with the kids by by letting their hair down a little bit and allowing the youth in them to come out. It helps youth see them as a real person. It helps them want to be with them. They say, "Geez, this is kind of fun. Wonder what this leader's going to do next."
Okay, good. We'll get back to you with some questions a little bit later. Another panelist in this segment is Sam Clark. Sam is from Iowa State University and professor of family environment and human development. Welcome to the show,
Thank you.
Sam. And Jerry Parsons, again, is joining us as State 4-H leader. Sam, I think I'll start with you on some questions. Doesn't fun detract from the content and subject matter that should be a part of a 4-H program?
I don't think so. I would assume that if people are getting together for a 4-H program, they're there to learn something. And if we look at the psychology of learning, it doesn't take long to get to motivation. And motivation is very well enhanced if the surroundings are pleasant, which would mean that fun works. Also, if you're learning and you can associate that with something meaningful so that you're doing something purposefully in a pleasant environment and having fun doing it, you're liable to retain a great deal more information and want to learn more and learn it faster than otherwise you would.
So play then has an educational value beyond just having a good time.
Probably our very best learning is when we try to answer our own questions. And those questions come from a play environment or a fun environment. So I would say play has an excellent learning value.
Okay. Jerry?
It sounds to me, Sam, like you're saying that we ought to not put recreation or fun or whatever we talk at the end of the meeting if we have time, that we should be planning that in from the beginning to the end and should be incorporating that as we go along. And I think a lot of people tend to want to do they want to do this. Well, we'll do it if we have time. We'll have fun if we have time.
Mm-hmm. Well, if fun and play are used in learning, and let me again say that it's the very best kind of learning there would be, it takes a lot of time. and it's relatively unstructured time doing something purposeful so that the kids can get involved in an activity which requires them to be active, be self-directed, and manipulate the materials that are provided. It isn't just free time. There have to be good materials provided, and that needs to be planned out ahead of time. But then there needs to be some hands-off kinds of things by the leaders and hands-on kinds of things by the kids that are involved in order for this thing to take place.
Okay. A question to follow up on your comment, Sam, and a question maybe for Jim. Describe some ways that you think leaders can make meetings fun without having them turn into a free-for-all.
That's a really good question. I think leaders can, as I started out with, can wear a funny hat, and of course, if you carry that too far, it can become just sort of a free-for-all, and so you want to be careful with that and balance that. But good leaders can do that. But I think also games, as Sam has alluded to, can be very, very good learning tools, particularly if we make them hands-on games. There used to be a criticism, I think, when many of us started using games in teaching. They'd say, "Well, gee, that's a gimmick," you know. And I finally said, "You bet. So what?" that it's a gimmick that works, and learning takes place, and that's what's important. We can make it fun for them. We can make it interesting by making it hands-on. I teach a lot of natural resources stuff, and so I brought along a skull here. You know, this is something that you usually see behind glass cases, you know, in museums, and it says, "Don't touch, don't even lean on the glass." But if you make them hands-on, and I've had there are probably many thousands of kids who've handled this one, and it's still intact. You know, it's still a magical thing for other kids to touch. So by making things hands-on, we make them possible for them to experience it with many senses, more than just their eyes, with their hands and by smelling it and all those things. But also we make it possible for them to learn better. So it can be fun, and yet it can be hands-on learning as well.
Okay. Sam, I've got a question that I think may land in your area. Talk about some general ways that adults can help learning be fun for kids, for young people.
Well, I think we could see three aspects of this. First would be a model, and children learn a great deal from watching adults, and that would be true of adolescents too, but they may watch each other. So if you can surround them by people, and particularly adults who enjoy what they're doing and are obviously having fun themselves in doing it, then you provide that first prerequisite, that is the fun. The second I've already alluded to, and that is time in the program in which you can have fun. And that has to be planned in there. It can't just be left to the last. It needs to be a part of the overall planning of the meeting or of the purpose of the gathering. The third would be the materials you provide for the fun. And these need to be action-type materials that are meaningful to the participants and which probably can be used in several different ways so that you can invent kinds of actions on those materials in more than just one way. We call that multifunctional material. So I think if those three prerequisites are met, an adult obviously having fun, time built into the program, and meaningful materials and projects, then fun will result.
Okay. Here's a question from a caller, a 4-H professional in Shelby County, and it's a challenge. How can we make doing a 4-H record book fun?
Do you want to try that one, Jerry?
Well, again, I think the thing that we need to think about is structuring that time to work on that, and it doesn't need to be a grueling time that you stay at it. You may find some ways to take a break and do some things, or look at it some various ways. You know, I talk about times of turning it over and looking at it in a different way. and I think there's some possibilities there. Some things just aren't plain hilarious. They're not like your camp, Jim, that automatically create that excitement. And yeah, I think record books probably are a real tough challenge to make them fun and exciting.
There may be another way, though. I think at least some portions of it, Don, could be fun, particularly if they've done them in a way that the record book is intended to be, where they set goals in the beginning, and that can't necessarily be a super fun process. But they set the goals, and then as a group they sit down and go over writing the record books together and adding some of them. They can kind of reminisce over the whole year and look back at pictures, and you say, "Gee, you remember that camp out we had when this happened?" And oh yeah, so that part could maybe be a little fun.
Don, another thing that could be brought into this at this point of discussion is that we say that it doesn't all have to be written down on a sheet of paper 8.5 by 11 in a hard cover. There are some creative ways using some of the new techniques of videoing and that are appropriate, and if young people can do that, now they may have to do an awful lot of inventing of their own ways of doing that at this moment, but that's going to be fun for them because it's going to be something different than what anybody else is doing.
Okay. This is a good question from a caller. Probably get a response from all three of you on this one. How can youth teach adult leaders to have fun with us in 4-H?
How can youth teach adult leaders to have fun with us in 4-H? That's a real good one. I'm not sure. I think it often has to start with the adult being willing to have fun, is wear a funny hat. Being willing to laugh at themselves. There's a certain amount of strong self-image in the adult if they can laugh at themselves. It also provides a very positive role model for youth. I'm not sure I can answer the question directly, other than by perhaps youth encouraging the adults to have fun with them, to ask, to say, gee, I'd really like to have you participate in this game with us, if nothing else.
One of the things they might do is, as they're doing their planning process and as they're planning an event or planning their meetings, they may find out from their leader as to what does the leader find is fun. Is it funny hats? If I was in your group, Jim, I could find out it was a funny hat. Now, I'm not sure Sam would see that the hat being funny is quite what it is, but I bet I could find out something that turned Sam on and that he got excited about. And young people can ask that question. That's a pretty fair question to ask in planning, because somebody's surely going to ask what kids do to have fun and how they want to do it. Well, why not think about the leader in that planning process too?
Okay. Jim, I want to get to you on a question. I've worked with you enough now to know that you sort of combine the two program components that we're talking about right now, hands-on learning and fun, in the workshops that you do and the ways that you work with different groups. Why is that important to you?
It's important to me because it works. It's the main thing. I see people enjoying learning, and I see people learning. They tell me that they learn. I find out sometimes years later, and they remember concepts that I've tried to teach them in that. And that's important to me. That's why I'm an educator and do the kinds of things I do. So I use techniques that work.
Okay. I think we're ready to take a look at our third video segment at this point. And this one deals with self-esteem. And I think self-esteem is, at least to me, is very much tied in with what we're talking about here, having fun and the hands-on learning approach. And we'll be hearing from 3 4-H'ers and a 4-H parent in this segment, and then we'll be back after that with more questions. So let's take a look at that.
Recognition, I feel, should be given to each club member in some way, or that each member should be placed in the spotlight at some time during the year. And then also, whenever they do a great job on their record book or a great job at fair, be sure that they get recognized in the club meetings, with parents' nights, in the community newspapers, just anything like that. If they feel important, they'll act like they'll act like they're confident in themselves, and they'll feel that way, and they'll contribute to the group.
Self-esteem can come from recognition by others that you've done something well, something worthwhile. It can come from the formal recognition bestowed with awards, or it can come when a 4-H volunteer tells a young person they've done a good job. Dean Faust is a 4-H'er who works with the clients of a community work activity center where he helps handicapped people with art projects. The appreciation and informal recognition he gets from the people he helps are what Dean values.
Well, part of my goal is I like to help other people in my community and people around me. So I help these people, these ladies, and taught them how to paint, and I hope that they'll like it. I've learned many things from them and learned things I didn't know before, and seeing their expressions on their faces when they get done, and 2 of them go to my church, and then seeing them come out and they hug me and they want to hold my hand and always say hi to me. Well, I'd much rather have this be able to teach them. It makes you feel better inside, and just it's a lot better than a ribbon or a certificate.
Dean's mother sees the intangible benefits that this work has brought to her son.
I think this means a lot more to him than anything because it's what he gives from inside. And he knows the good things that he's done and what they've given to him, and he can carry that with him for a long time. And that's what's important. It's hard to measure what he's gained. But when we come home, when we worked tonight and we came home, that's all he wants to talk about for a couple days, and it's to share with the people that we know that he has such a good feeling about the girls, and they relate well to each other, and they express to him and he expresses himself to them, and it's that inner, smile that you see for him.
Recognition does more than honor just the individual. It can bring the group closer together.
I think ribbons and trophies are good incentives, but also just the fact that a leader or a parent or the community and the group recognizes as a whole that this particular member is doing great things and that they're really learning and really trying and putting forth an effort. Recognition in a 4-H club grouping or on the county level or whatever is a great motivator for those kids to keep in there, keep trying new things, getting involved in different activities. It makes them feel good about themselves, and it makes the club feel like a unit.
Indirectly, recognition and awards also honor the recipient's group and family for the support which they give to make success possible. For this reason, 4-H member Kim Weiss says it's important to her that her family be present on any occasion at which she receives an award.
And the reason is because, well, when I first started in 4-H, I was very shy, very, I kept to myself a lot, and I didn't have very much self-confidence. And my parents and my brother are the type of people that kept pushing me. They didn't make me do things, but they wanted me to do well, and they encouraged me to do the best that I could. I guess the other people I like to have present are like staff people, people who've encouraged me along the way, my 4-H leaders, and just friends, my closest friends. Because without all those people that encourage you along the way and pick you up when you're feeling down, I couldn't have made it as far as I did in 4-H without those people.
Welcome back to our third and final question and answer session. Joining us on the set at this point is a new panelist, Don Brosher, and he is a 4-H and Youth Development Specialist here at Iowa State University and a member of the State 4-H staff.
Right.
Welcome, Don.
Thank you.
And again, Jerry Parsons is with us as well. Don, first of all, as you looked at the videotape that we just saw, and as you know young people, maybe a philosophical question, first of all, a very general one. Why be concerned at all about the self-esteem of youth?
I think that's an excellent question in the sense that why all the hubbub about self-esteem? Why do we spend so much time talking about it and spend efforts programming for that? And it's real critical in the sense that we know that the self-esteem is basically defined as how we feel about ourselves. And we also know that that's based upon kind of the internal picture that we have of who we are, our self-concept. And if we know that that affects our attitude, and our attitude affects our behavior. Therefore, if we want to have young people grow up and exhibit positive, mature, responsible behavior, they need to have a good, healthy self-concept and feel good about the things that happen to them in their life, or have a real healthy, positive self-esteem. So we know that it's directly related to outcome or behavior.
A question from a 4-H leader. How do I know that I'm building the self-esteem or enhancing the self-esteem in the members in my 4-H group?
Okay. One of the ways I think that leaders can begin to understand how young people feel about themselves is to begin to watch and observe children as they interact with each other, as they interact with adults. Those young people that exhibit with their body language, that hold back from the group, they don't participate very often, they are usually the last people to volunteer when asked for help or assistance. They're people that don't like to have attention drawn to them in groups. Those are the people that have low self-esteem. And as you begin to help a young person feel good about the experiences that they have and feel good about who they are, you'll see them physically change their demeanor. Their face will lighten up, they will laugh a lot more, they will speak a lot more, they'll get involved in the activities much more, they'll interact, they'll share their own points of view, and they'll volunteer a lot more readily.
Okay. Another question again from a leader, and this deals with competition and self-esteem. Specifically, what effect does competition have on a 4-H'er's self-esteem?
Well, this is a really complex question. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of competition in growth and learning, and there's a lot of different opinions about it out there right now. But one of the things that is real critical that we do know about competition is that it depends upon the child, it depends upon the youngster, and each individual will handle competition differently based upon how they perceive the situation. But we also know that younger children probably are not as capable mature-wise to handle heavy competition. And the more pressure we put on for winning is probably very destructive to their psychological growth and maturity level. That also can be true of older adolescents as well, depending on how much the winning is stressed over the learning. If competition can be incorporated into the learning process where it's fun and they're having fun with it, and the main output or outcome is the learning process, the competition can be handled and it will enhance the self-esteem. If the main emphasis becomes learning or becomes winning at the cost of learning, then it will detract from the self-esteem.
Okay.
Don, one of the things that I think is very helpful is looking at this whole element of competition as a part of a bigger whole. And sometimes we look at recognizing young people only as they would come through a competitive activity. One of the neat things that's in this packet, in the notebooks that are included as a part of this training, is a 4-stage recognition program that will put competition in a place and lets 3 other types of recognition fit in that. And I would urge the training teams to really look at that to help in that process and broaden the concept of leaders, because sometimes they think they have to have competition if they're going to have recognition. And that model of recognizing 4-H'ers, which builds self-esteem, is not the only way of doing it.
That's a good point, Jerry. Very good point.
A question from a caller from Sac County, and it has a lot to do with self-esteem. How can leaders counteract the lack of support in the home, which we see frequently?
That's real difficult because you have 4-H leaders have the contact with the youngsters for such a short period of time in their whole life. But the one way we can counteract that is by making the time that we do spend with those youngsters as very useful time, helpful time, fun time, meaningful to those young people, and open ourselves up to pay attention to what those young people are experiencing in their life so that they can be ready if that young person wants to share beyond the kind of learning experience and share more of a deeper level of what's going on with me.
Okay. Thanks, Don, for your participation in this segment. Jerry, I'm going to turn to you, I think, for what I would call a wrap-up for this evening. We've talked about a lot of different things in the last hour, and we hope that viewers have seen this as more than just an hour to watch television. And I think you have some things to say to summarize and set the stage now for what happens next.
Yes, Don, and I think the important thing for us to say that this is just the beginning. It's the beginning of an exciting adventure that we're involved in the 4-H program to help build those local 4-H units so that they are an important, viable learning experience. And that's really where the challenge comes. We have a very big challenge, all of us who are involved, the state and area staff, the county staff, and the volunteer training teams that are going to be working throughout this state in the next period of time. It's a really big challenge to help make that local 4-H club unit, whether it's a club or a project group or a school enrichment classroom or a special interest group, to make that an exciting, viable learning experience for young people. We need to think about that, and we need to plan very carefully at it. You, as a volunteer training team, are that very important key element. It's through you that this educational experience will be carried to all the volunteers in this state. We look to you because we think that local 4-H unit and the volunteers working with them are a very important part. It's at that local unit or local club where we reach the most young people. It's also the best place for us to begin to teach skills that will last a lifetime for young people. And if we do a good job, we'll have young people to participate in the program at the county, the area, and the state level. If we don't do a good job at that local program, we really don't have an opportunity to reach them at other places. You'll want to talk about the 4-H, ideal 4-H group. What's it like? What kind of a 4-H group are we talking about? We've talked about 4 elements of that tonight, and you have training materials to help you with that. We've talked about hands-on learning. We've talked about having fun. We've talked about program planning that involves young people along with adults, but involves young people in planning their educational experiences. And we've talked about helping build self-esteem through recognition. Research and practical experience shows us and will tell us that these are key elements in having a successful 4-H group. We think it's a challenge to do that. Our goal is to reach at least one adult in every local 4-H group in this state. As a volunteer training team, we're depending upon you to help get that job done. You'll learn new skills as you're participating in that program. You've got 4 videos to help you, a notebook that's full of viable, exciting information. You have a staff team ready to help you. Your county staff and the state and area staff are all ready to be of help to you as you plan and carry this out. Our challenge has been to make the best better. And as always, that is a challenge. But that's what we're all about, helping make those local 4-H units the best they can possibly be.
Jerry, thanks very much.
Thank you.
For all of the panelists, I'd like to thank the audience for your very important part of tonight's program, the viewing site coordinators, and the callers with questions and concerns that will play a part in shaping 4-H in Iowa in years to come. This broadcast is a part, but it's only a part of a much larger and longer effort. an effort to look at the 4-H program and how it can better fit into the lives of more young people. It seems like a lot to do, maybe a lot to change. Well, that's true if we think about doing it all at once, but it's easier one step at a time. You might be wondering how we'll all know if this program is successful. And I think it will be if you're right now thinking of 1 or 2 new insights or new ideas about the way you work with your 4-H group. If you're saying, I think I could do that. I think that might work. Well, if you're thinking that, then I think we've accomplished a lot. Thanks for being a part of this, and good night.